So, I kind of just want to talk about story stuff, and specifically the Scions going forward. Because I had a lot of expectations, well, maybe not expectations, but hopes. I had a lot of hopes going into Dawn Trail about what's going to happen to the Scions. There was a lot of things that I want to happen, and as we all know now, assuming that if you're watching this video, I assume you're caught up on the MSQ. If you're not, then like, spoilers ahead, don't listen to this. But we were disappointed, at least I was really disappointed, with the lack of, I guess, the lack of, even though the Scions were there, they practically weren't, because they weren't utilized in any meaningful way. They were there just to kind of be there. And it kind of reminded me of like, in a lot of old school Final Fantasy games, like for example, Final Fantasy VII. A lot of the characters you can have in your party in Final Fantasy VII, they have like their little arc, which is a very small portion of the game, and then they're just kind of there for the remainder of the game, because like you have to save the world, right? You know, for example, in Final Fantasy VII, spoilers for Final Fantasy VII, I suppose, the original, Red 13. You know, you get Red 13 pretty early on in the game, and you can have him in your party or not, you know, it's up to you. And then a little bit later, he has his part of the story. You go to Cosmo Canyon, you learn about his backstory, he does character development, and his arc is kind of complete. And then he's just kind of there, you know, like he's there because, you know, he's your friend by that point, and you need to save the world, which makes sense. And that's fine in a game like a single player game like Final Fantasy VII that has like a clear ending. You can't have the entire game about Red 13 because other things are going on, you know? But in terms of the Scions in Final Fantasy XIV, after a while, because Final Fantasy XIV keeps going on, keeps adding new expansions, adding new patches, adding new story. After a while, having a character just kind of be there doesn't feel good, right? So like, especially after Endwalker, that's where most of the Scions are. And actually, depending on the Scion, that's where a lot of the Scions live. Thancred, for example. You know, Thancred had a lot of cool story moments. And Thancred's arc is all about Minfilia and Reen and coming to terms with all of that. And after all that kind of got resolved in like Shadowbringers, he's still with us, but he's just kind of there because, like, well, we have to save the world, right? He's a Scion, we have to save the world. So going into Dawn Trail, I was really hoping that they would give us new reasons to love the Scions, and that didn't happen, right? But what I want to kind of just talk about in this video, just kind of ramble a little bit, is what I would like to see going forward with the Scions. Because I want, we like the Scions. Even the Scions that I don't like, I still like them, you know? It's really a matter of, do I really like them? Or do I think they're fine, you know? But like, I don't dislike any of them. I just like, I think some of them are definitely more, better utilized than others. So, really quick, are things that I want to see. And some of these I know they're not going to do. So for example, for Thancred. Thancred's arc is all about one, being like a father figure to Minfilia and Reen, and coming to terms with the fact that, he thinks that he failed Minfilia in the first place, and getting over that in order to be, a father figure to Reen. But then, he had to go away from the first, and now he's good with all that, he did a really good job raising Reen for the time that he was there, and he's okay with the fact that, she's on her own now because they have no other choice at the moment. And I feel like his character, with all these characters at the end of Endwalker, they all pretty much felt pretty content because Endwalker was, quote unquote, end for at least a major part of the story. They did a good job of wrapping that up. But Thancred's story is him devoting all of himself to Minfilia/Reen. And I think an interesting direction to take Thancred's character is, he's still going to give himself to some kind of cause because that's just who he is. But I think while he's doing that, I think an interesting place to take his character would be to let him do something for himself. Let him find happiness for himself, not just giving himself to what he truly believes in. And I know they're not going to do this, but I think the best thing for Thancred would be for him to have a romantic interest. Not the player character, like a new character that he would be, romantically interested and involved in. They're never going to do that because Square Enix tries really, really hard to make sure that the player character can have their own kind of headcanon. And I'm sure that there's lots of players that their headcanon for their character is that they're in a relationship with Thancred. I think if they keep doing that forever, honestly, I feel like that's restraining the characters to be like as good as they could possibly be. But that's just the world that we live in, right? So they're not going to do that, but honestly, I would love to see that. I think that would be really interesting. But they're not going to do that. But anyway, this is my list. This is what I would like to see. Moving on, we have a lot of Scions to get through. Urianger. I really like Urianger. I think he's had a large amount of really interesting beats in the story with him like being a double agent and everything. And he's had some really wonderful moments in the MSQ where he has had some of the most inspiring moments. And that moment in Endwalker in Sharlayan is one of the most heartfelt moments in the game. And I love Urianger. He's great. Saying that, moving forward, there needs to be room for new characters. There needs to be room for new Scions. We can't just have an ever increasing, we can't have like 15 people traveling with us, right? If any of the Scions were to just retire, I feel like it would be Urianger. Because right now, Urianger is just like, he's just like Thancred's friend, right? And they're like a buddy cops, right? And so his place in the Scions is just like, yeah, he's just kind of there. And I feel like the best place to go for the group as a whole, I feel like Urianger should retire. He should be a teacher in Sharlayan, right? Or keep hanging out with the Loprits or something. That doesn't mean that we're never going to see him again. Like, he can absolutely pop up here and there. But if any of them were to retire, I think Urianger should retire. Moving on, Y'shtola. So, up until the end of Base and Walker, Y'shtola was my least favorite Scion. And that's because her only purpose in the story was to explain magic to us. Really, really quick. In A Realm Reborn, none of the Scions really do much, so you can't really hold that against her. Heaven's Ward, she's gone for a lot of the story, then we bring her back because we need magic. She doesn't know how to do the magic that we need, but her teacher does, so she introduces us to Matoya, and that's all she does for Heaven's Ward. Stormblood, she gets slashed early on, and she's gone for the rest of the expansion. Shadowbringers, at the time, I was really looking forward to reuniting with Y'shtola and Shadowbringers. Because I thought, Y'shtola's gonna be like the adult in the room, and she's gonna be the voice of reason and everything, and that's what I thought. And then we finally meet her in Shadowbringers, and first she mistakes us for a Sin Eater, and then she throws shade at Thancred after Thancred has broken Reen out of prison, is eluding a military force, is a single father raising Reen in the wilderness, and hunting down Sin Eaters for years. All the while, Y'shtola is hanging out with the forest people and being worshipped by the forest people. And the first thing that she does when we get reunited is she throws shade at Thancred. Like, I was like, okay, this this isn't what I was expecting. And she doesn't. She gets a lot of credit while doing very little. So by the end of Base Endwalker, I was like, yeah, she's my least favorite Scion. But then in the post patches, she's given a purpose of, like, she's really obsessing over traveling between worlds, and that's really cool. So surprisingly, even though she's like my least favorite, she's probably the Scion with the best direction going forward, especially since it's pretty obvious that going forward, traveling between worlds is where the story is going to go. So Y'shtola is actually probably fine. Let's see, moving on. The twins. The main thing that I want for the twins is a small time skip. The twins can't be 16 or 17 forever. And they've been 16 and 17 for so long that it's kind of weird now. Like, the MSQ has told us we have been on a long, long journey, and they're still 16 or 17 years old. I would love to see young adult Alphinaud and Alisaie. You know, instead of 16 or 17, have them be 20. So much has happened since the beginning of the game. I think it's fair to say that they should be 20 by now. And I know before you go into the comments and be like, well, Ellison's mature slowly because the MSQ told us that. Yeah, I know. But it's just a little weird that they're still children. I think the best thing for their characters is to grow up. And as far as what they do, you can do anything with the twins because they're they've chosen the path to be, like, really focusing on helping Garlemald be rebuilt and be better than what they were in the past. And that's an interesting place to go. But I think doing that and showing the passage of at least a little bit of time and having them grow to be young adults rather than children for the remainder of time, I think that's the best direction to go, and they can really be involved with the Garleans, being envoys, being just their own people with their own wants, needs, and desires. You know, them growing up would be the most interesting thing for Alphinaud and Alisaie. G'rahatia, we all love G'rahatia, right? G'rahatia had probably the most character, maybe not the most character development, but like he had one of the biggest stories because he was such a major player in Shadowbringers. I want a little bit more Exarch and a little bit less young G'rahatia. I know that they fuse souls together, so they are both, but it's him just being our fanboy isn't that interesting. I think G'rahatia works best and is the most satisfying version of himself when responsibility is thrust upon him. You know, that's why he became the Exarch, is because he had no other choice, right? So, I think something needs to be done that only G'rahatia can do. Now, whether that's has to do with the Crystal Tower, as like maybe we need the Crystal Tower as an energy source or something in order to travel between worlds or something. There needs to be something in the story that only G'rahatia can do, and because he will stand up and do it. So having him just be around and being our fanboy isn't that interesting. I want him to have responsibility. Who am I missing? Estinian. Estinian's story in Heaven's Ward was so good. And kind of what I described earlier about how, like, once going back to my example of Red 13, like, their story is done and then they're just kind of there. That is Estinian, right? Their story was done and has been done, and now he's just kind of there. We can't have Estinian around because he just happens to be vacationing in the same place that we're adventuring and saving the world. That's just ridiculous, right? Like, hey, Estinian's here to help. That's great. Why is he here? He just happened to be vacationing. You know, he took some time off for himself. He just happens to be close by while we need him to save the world. It's, oh my god. So Estinian's story of he's now like he's now like the bridge between humans and dragons, right? That's kind of where his story ended up. But he's also a dragoon. He's also incredibly powerful. He's a dragon slayer, but that also means he's a monster hunter. I think the best place to take his character would be for him to be a monster hunter. You know, there's tons of monsters in every Final Fantasy game that are just they would need something like Estinian to take care of. And I think him being instead of him just deciding to go on vacation where we're going, I think being a monster hunter in some capacity, whether that's with us or not, would be a more interesting place to take his character, and the characters that he would meet along the way in that path would be a very clear way to do it. Whether that's in the MSQ or in side quests, like, I feel like that's really good, like, reason to have him around, more like side quest areas than MSQ areas. Am I missing anybody? Oh, Kryl. Kryl got done so dirty in Dawn Trail. It's like, oh yeah, we need Kryl to have her time in the spotlight because we didn't do it in Endwalker, and then Dawn Trail happens and she gets one quest in the last zone. Gosh, she got done so dirty. To be honest, I've never been a huge fan of Kryl. Like, I was most interested in her while I was doing Eureka, but that's side content, right? I mean, I guess Kryl, her story with her parents is kind of done now, thanks to Dawn Trail. I think just, probably her, like, researching the history of her grandfather, I think, would be the most interesting way to go with her. There's probably a more interesting thing that you could do that, like, you can probably just make up something that would be more interesting for her to do, but yeah, I've always kind of considered Kryl to be like B-team Scions, so I'm not really too concerned with her. Am I missing anybody? I think that's about it. Yeah, I want, whether my ideas or feelings in this are accurate or not, or if you agree with them or not, I think it is obvious that if we're gonna have the Scions around, we need new, passionate goals, aspirations, problems for them to deal with. I think it's gonna be incredibly unsatisfying if they're just there, you know? I want more reasons to love them. We can have multiple stories going on at the same time, you know? Like, in Shadowbringers, we got wonderful character development from Thancred that, like, you could take that storyline completely out of Shadowbringers and it would be really good still, but but adding that in made it better, right? So we can have all sorts of really good stories for all the Scions while we're also doing other, like, big overarching stories, right? You can have chapters where this one Scion gets the spotlight. For Dawntrail, you could have mostly the same story, although I don't know why you'd want to, but you could have, instead of Wooklamat talking to us all the time, you can have Wooklamat have one-on-one time with each of the Scions in each of the zones. You know, you can give us those moments where we could really enjoy each character. You can have interesting interactions between Alice and Wooklamat. You can have interesting interactions between Estinian and Alphino. All of that can happen and not disrupt the main story. So, going forward, I really hope that we get new reasons to love the Scions, because we already like them, and we want more of them. Let me know what you think below. Are my suggestions or feelings weird? Maybe, maybe not. Let me know.